Okay, so welcome everyone. If you have not, please introduce yourself in our chat with your name, your organization, the position that you hold in your city, anything else that you would like for us to know. This just helps the people on our call to get to know you a little better, as well as Nevada volunteers to see who it is that we're talking to and who is attending our sessions and hopefully getting something out of it. Today, we are going to be doing storytelling for volunteer recruitment and buy-in. I am super excited to have Heather Davis, who is the Director of Community Engagement for Opportunity Village, but also one of Nevada Volunteers commissioners. And so we're very excited to have you today, Heather. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and you can have your conversation with everybody, and we'll be good to go.
All right, good to go. Okay, well, we're going to jump right in, and you guys are going to get to participate too, which I know you're super excited about. I'm going to be asking, and I'm going to need some feedback, so be ready, okay? I can't see all your names, but I'm so glad you're each here, and I look forward to a time when hopefully we can meet in person. So if you're ever in Vegas and haven't been to Opportunity Village, give me a call. I'd love to bring you out, give you a tour, talk more, get to know each other, support each other. So I'm going to start with the story. Go figure, right? Before I was married, when I worked at a university, I had a little dog, and I wanted this dog so bad. I rented a house from the university. I was in student affairs, and all the coaches around me had dogs. And I asked if I could get a dog, and my boss said no. And I said, wait a minute. People don't ask, and they have dogs. I ask, and you say no. So finally, I broke him down, and I was able to adopt this little girl, and she was the love of my life. And I would take her on walks. She'd go jogging with me, and I knew everything about her pedigree. I knew everything about her, and it was very important to me because my job was pretty much like it is now. It's more of a lifestyle. When you work, you work. When people want to talk, you talk, because college students are 24/7 and volunteers are pretty much 24/7, right? They don't always want to talk during their work hours. They want to talk when they're off to plan their activities, to build support and all that. So I would walk my little girl around the neighborhood, and one day I was walking her, and love of my life, what I've always wanted, and this little boy, maybe 5 years old, across the street, comes running out the door, and he says to his mom, look, it's the ugly dog. And the mom's face, yelled it as loud as he could. The mom's face was just mortified. She was just like, you would have thought this was my human child. I do not have human children so close, but she was just mortified and said, oh my gosh, and was like, hush. Well, I can hear everything because it's, they're just right across the street on the sidewalk. He's like, no, Mom, it's the ugly dog. And she's like, that's an ugly dog. That's not an ugly dog. Just panicking. And he just looks at her matter of fact, and I'm like trying not to laugh. And he goes, yes, it is, Mom. That is an ugly dog. And the mom could not have been more apologetic. And every time I saw her from that day forward, she didn't want to make eye contact, like she wounded my soul or something. So I'm going to get back to that story a little later, but I just want to rope you guys all in with the dog story, and I'll tell you why I used that one at the end of our conversation. Sound good? Don't really have so everyone's just like, sounds good, right?
Heather, I'm trying to see. Barbara has her hand up, and I'm trying to figure out what it is she needs real quick.
Okay, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
I am so sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to forward this link to our new boss so she could sit in. Is there a way to do that? Or since she didn't register by yesterday, she's out of luck?
I can send it to her. Barbara, do you want to shoot me a message with the email, and I'll get it to her?
You got it, Toyota. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, Heather, go ahead.
Oh, no, you're fine. Okay, so you are absolutely welcome. More the merrier. So don't forget about the ugly dog, and we'll talk more about that later, okay? So question for everybody on this call. What motivates you in your current role? What really gets you excited, gets you going? Is it the mission? Is it your people? Is it what you're trying to accomplish in your day-to-day tasks? Is it checking things off a list? What truly gets you excited and makes you want to come back and do more and spread the message more? If I could have like one or two people just click on, I guess, and just say 2 or 3 things that motivate you most in your role.
So for me, it's both the mission and the students, because our nonprofit works with first generation college students. So just me, myself being a first generation college student and remembering how difficult that process was, the mission of college access to all first gen students and just working with the students directly, I think is what motivates me the most.
Oh, wonderful, great. That's a wonderful example, Brianna. Who else? Give me another one. What motivates you? There's got to be another person. You guys aren't motivated today? Do we need some coffee? Like interview led into our veins. One more person. Come on. Nobody? This is going to be a long hour if nobody
I know.
joins.
Do we need to like randomly call on people? I have the lists of people who are here.
Shannon, what motivates you since you're chit-chatting anyway?
I'm usually very motivated by mission. The ways in which I'm helping people and the impact that it has in their lives, you know, how I'm able to make an impact in the world around me, basically.
Okay. All right. Okay. So a mission. So, which is really cool to hear because that tells us that this gives people a purpose, right? They have this purpose in their role. They have this internal pull to really support the organization they work with. Okay. Whether it's first generation college students, whether it's Nevada volunteers, whatever it may be. One thing that really motivates me in my job is the people, which is our mission. So Opportunity Village, we serve over 3,000 individuals here in the Valley, but we started in 1954 with only 7 families. Prior to Opportunity Village, I worked with Special Olympics, and it once again was the people. I remember when the job first opened up, and I told my husband, because I was in an in-between job. It wasn't a career, it was just a job. I was out of higher ed and I was, like I said, in between. And I showed the job description to my husband. I said, do you think I could do this? And my husband's a huge sports guy, right? Triathlons, CrossFit, all this stuff. Not me. And he's like, you can do that. And I was like, but it's a sports job. I'm not a sports person. He's like, it's not a sports job. I'm like, yes, it is. It says it's a sports job. And he's like, that's a people job. And so we went back and forth. I watched that job for 6 months. Didn't have a background working with individuals who need support due to disabilities or families who need support due to their adult children or children having disabilities. Had no idea what door was opening in front of me. And then one day I decided if nothing changes, nothing changes, right? So I applied for the job, stepped into Special Olympics and met someone who has actually become like a brother to me. And he truly is a family member now. He's 33 years old. He calls me his sister from another mister. He's my brother from another mother. He's back in Illinois. He comes and visits us. We've traveled all over for Special Olympics, and now he comes to the Valley. And I always say one day if he needed a place to live, he's more than welcome to live with us. Now my husband may have a different story. No, my husband loves him too. He's super close to my husband as well. But he's my motivation. He's the one that keeps me going. He's the brother that I never knew that I always wanted. I'm going to start crying. Holy smokes. See the motivation, vulnerability, the motivation that just changes my world. I talk to him probably every single day on FaceTime or texting. As a matter of fact, this weekend, he is going to Special Olympic State Games for powerlifting. He's been working on it since we met almost 10 years ago. Super close to his parents as well. And he is what really keeps me going and made me want to do more. He is the motivation that got me to find Opportunity Village. Next question. Gonna need some feedback, guys, and I promise this is all gonna tie together in this perfect package when we're done. What keeps you up at night? What keeps you up at night in your role? Anybody want to share? It's just gonna be me, Brianna, and Shannon. It's gonna be a lot of anybody. I can give you an example. So what keeps me up at night? The need for support. Obviously, the recession or the potential recession, funding. We are really drastically underfunded with our reimbursement from the state. We're over 70% self-funded, I have to say that. So the reimbursement from the state, we can only bill for certain things, and it has not increased in almost 10 to 20 years, I think it was. It's something crazy. And I don't work with the numbers, I work with the peoples and the stories. But that funding is huge for us. It's the only thing really that we have that isn't something we raise on our own. So does that keep me up at night? Does that make me think, how are we going to keep serving? How are we going to keep supporting? How are we going to keep helping people? Our high needs, when we have an event coming up, if we're 70% self-funded and I need volunteers to, one, keep our event in line with our tax expectations. You guys have all heard of UBIT, right? Making sure our volunteers don't outweigh our employees, that we stay within that role so we don't have to pay taxes, so it's not a business line. But making sure we're recruiting the right volunteers so we have a good event. So those events not only send the message of our mission out to the community, but bring the funding in to support the individuals we serve, which is why we're there. When those numbers, some of our volunteers like to sign up at last minute, right? Because squirrel, something else will be happening that may distract them. So not only do we have enough volunteers, but do we have enough overflow? So when we have no shows, we're going to still have a successful event. That can keep me up at night too. I'm going to challenge one person. What keeps you up at night? It can be something I said.
Well, I will let you know. So Rachel from Immunize Nevada is sick and does not have any voice. So she's been typing the chat. So she said, wearing so many hats in my position and not feeling I can give our volunteer program everything I used to be able to.
Yes, perfect. And you know what, Shannon, if you guys want to type in there, Shannon, if you want to help me out and read those, that would be perfect. Then you guys don't have to use your voice or anything like that. And we can just read them off as things come to mind. So yeah, a lot of hats in a not-for-profit. We're always kind of like switching gears and pivoting, right? Depending on what's on our plate. And trying to decide what the priority should be when we have a lot of asks coming in. Is there any other new ones on there?
Brianna just agreed, said same in general. I feel like I can't do enough sometimes and it is overwhelming.
All right. Okay, so we have what motivates us as our mission. Okay. First generation college students. James, my brother from another mother. What keeps us up at night? Funding, service, connection. Here's a fun one. What gives you laughter or joy in your job? You know, when I started at OV, so I don't work in direct care. So we have various programs and we serve individuals who need 24-hour nursing care. They need the support of maybe feeding tubes. They have the support of a wheelchair. Maybe they're bedridden. Maybe they come to us in our day habilitation so their family members can go to work. We have individuals that come to us to try and determine what it is that their interests are, what their gifts are, what their talents are, so they can be successful in their career, but that they can find joy in their work and they have a caseworker who helps them. But I don't work a lot one-on-one with our individuals outside of our ambassadors, who are my coworkers, who have been served by Opportunity Village, who now go and talk to people and tell their stories, go figure, right, to get people involved in how OB has impressed them. But what brings me laughter and joy? We have two individuals that are on our janitorial crew, and Daniel and Christian. And when I first started, they would walk by and they'd be like, hey, Heather. And I'd go, what you got, butterscotch? And they'd go, okie dokie, artichoke. And we just go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth until they couldn't come up with another saying. And I'd say, see you later, alligator. And then I could hear them walking down the hallway, just coming up with another one and another one and another one. And then they would get stuck. And Christian would say something like, okay, peanut butter lemon drop. Doesn't fit, right? But we would just laugh together and we would smile. And I could hear him laughing as he walked down the hallway to the next building, peanut butter lemon drop. And he'd just start laughing and laughing. And it just brought me so much joy, this little exchange we had every day. And to this day, almost 4 years later, we still have that exchange and they still remember every single back and forth when I forget. What brings you joy? What brings you laughter?
So we do have a couple in the chat. Melissa says working directly with volunteers. And Rachel says being able to see the relief on a mom's face when we're able to provide her children vaccines for free, especially when they are uninsured or don't have a doctor.
Yes, those moments. Can you imagine when a mom knows I can provide for my child's health and well-being, right? A fundamental need for them to be healthy so they can be successful. They can take advantage of opportunities that are in front of them. They can thrive. Such a big deal. What is this a new one too? Seeing all the kiddos that play in our facility. Yeah. Yeah. Seeing their smiles probably. What is it that you do, Carla? Can you type that in there? I didn't see that earlier. Or do you know, Shannon?
I have to check. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Oh, operations manager. Somewhere, operations manager somewhere. Okay, we'll keep going. Okay, so lots of things that keep us, remind us of.
Oh, Children's
don't-
Museum. Sorry.
Wonderful.
I
California.
don't
Okay,
know
love it.
everybody yet, so I
No,
don't know
no.
everybody's roles and stuff.
I just called Shannon in to help me. So she's like, wait a minute, I'm working. Oh, okay. So we have our mission that keeps us going. We have what keeps us up at night, the struggles, the things that weigh on us. We have the things that bring us joy. Now here's my question. When you talk to your inner circle, so your safety net, be it your spouse, your significant other, your family members, your siblings, your friends, and you're talking about your job, what is the thing that you always share that you're vulnerable about that just brings a tear to your eye because it really touches you, or something that's just like, if they knew that this is why this is so important to me. When you're vulnerable with your inner circle, what do you share? Does anybody know? Omar is typing.
So for me, it's kind of like I said earlier, just me, myself being first generation and all the challenges that I had to deal with. Usually I'll kind of share some stories about the struggles I had to go through with it, like before college and during college. And that's probably like when I'm most vulnerable, is when I share why I got into this work.
Yeah. Probably sometimes gives you pause if you should or should not share, right? Brianna, do you ever have a moment where you're like, oh, do I share this? Do I not? Did I share too much?
I think now I just share too much because I realize that it really helps me form relationships with the students. But before, I used to be like, should I talk about this? And now I'm just like, open book. I'll say anything.
Perfect. I love that. So there was a hesitancy in the beginning to let that vulnerability out, and then you saw how it really creates those bonds and builds those bridges. And now is it like a go-to for you?
Yeah, I'd pretty much like share a lot, or I try to like just tell the students, my story, just because I think that like I said, it helps build connections with them. And then
Yeah.
they'll willing to trust me more, and all around it makes it better. I'm still a little more hesitant when I'm around like potential like I don't know the word, like grantors, or people who are gonna like possibly donate money,
Yes.
or like outsiders out of the LIT organization. But I'm definitely like pretty open with my students that I work with.
Yeah. So that vulnerability gets a little bit more maybe clouded with the gray area when you're working with someone who you may perceive as they can impact your students even further if they were going to provide financial resources. So you don't want to overshare, but you don't want to undershare. So where's that balance, right? Where's that balance? Where with your relationships with your students, what I hear is you're trying to find that connection so you can let them know that when you say you've been there, you really have been there, right? And you can really walk with them in their experience. I actually love that. I see Omar put my mental state. Yeah, we always don't want to share the struggles or the things that make us tired or exhausted, or when we get the same question for the 100th time and we're like, oh, let me help you with that. And inside we're saying, I need to have a button that says record so I can just play, right? We kind of maybe let that out amongst ourselves in a joking way because we know that others don't know what we do, but sometimes we may feel like a broken record, right? We have to repeat the same things, and it can be exhausting. But we as individuals, to keep people coming in, to bring people into our mission, to share the stories, to share the joy and the laughter, and to share what keeps us up at night, and to be vulnerable, to get that buy-in so they see the purpose. We want to be able to really give of ourselves, which wasn't ever probably in our job description, right? Wasn't in our job description. Give of yourself at a level you never intended to. But I'll tell you what, when I started doing that, much like what Brianna said, it's when, in many ways, the floodgates opened. Being vulnerable. So when I worked at Special Olympics, I would go talk to many people, whether it be community groups, whether it be corporate partners. In Special Olympics, you wear many, many hats, is one of the things I heard people say, because you're one person and you cover a whole region. So I covered in the beginning 8 counties, and then it moved to 11 counties. Okay, so I did all the fundraising, planning, volunteer recruitment, everything. So the majority of our resources can go to the programs we put on. And there were many times where I would go to a group and I would look up their mission and see what their focus was in the community, or see what they looked to do to leave their imprint when they served, you know, what was important to them. And there were many times I found people who weren't sports focused. And I just still find a way to make a bridge. So in those situations, I started out with a real easy thing. I'd be like, guys, I want to share with you something that may surprise you. And I would say, I do not like sports. And instantly the heads in the room would turn to me. And all those heads that were turning to me, I knew were maybe my people whose value was greatest on the arts, fine and performing arts, or their value was greatest on workforce development, or their value was greatest on something other than the sports, right? Not because they didn't see the value in sports, but it wasn't their heart's pull, okay? And when they heard someone who was a regional director from Special Olympics come in front of them and say, I don't like sports, I don't enjoy sports, everyone in the room instantly had my attention. And I'll never forget, my senior supervisor would look at me and be like, what did you just say? I'm like, it's true though. But my next sentence was, I see the value in sports. And what I see is how those sports give people courage to go to the next steps. I see how it impacts them off the field. I see how it shows their families that maybe there's more that they can do and can accomplish. And it opens up these doors that before were closed to them. And I see their pure sheer joy when they get a medal, or they're celebrating their friends get a medal. Or I see that quick turnaround when they don't get the medal they wanted, but they realize they gave it all they got. And I see when our college students, maybe first generation, when I see our high school students that are volunteering, who are athletes themselves, see our Special Olympic athletes turn on a dime to go from being disappointed in themselves and discouraged to being like, you know what? I did my best. I gave it my all. And then walking away saying, I need to remember that because I have gifts and skills and talents. I have a full scholarship. I have fill in the blank. And their personality and their ability to refocus is what I need when I'm on the field. I've seen how it impacts the community, but I still didn't like sports. But the story of how sports could speak to me and pull me into that community and see the value to go out and bring people in to support Special Olympics is what got people's attention, because it built the bridge. Laughter and joy, man, that one is so easy. That one is so easy. There's so many stories of laughter and joy that I can share, so many stories of motivating. But when I look at people and they come to me for Opportunity Village, I always start with the questions. Why are you here? What brought you here? What do you know about Opportunity Village? And you know, 9 times out of 10, if you guys were in front of me and I saw your faces, I'd ask, how many people have been to the Magical Forest? And hands would go up. And I'd be like, how many of you know what the Magical Forest funds? And all the hands would go down. This is not unique to us as a not-for-profit. I know many of you guys who do fundraisers, people come to your events not really fully knowing what they fund, if it's not something that really highlights the mission. And ours is the carnival. For those of you who are not from Las Vegas, it's we use up to 200 volunteers a night from October all the way through January. So over 10,000 volunteers a year, completely volunteer run for the most part. We have 10 plus volunteers for every 1 employee. So you can imagine the amount of recruiting we have to do to fill up our fall events. And that's just that. That doesn't include our Santa Run or our Black Tie Camelot where we use volunteers. But when I bring people in and they say, oh, you work for Opportunity Village, you work at the Magical Forest. I've been there. It's a carnival. It's got 2 million lights and carnival rides. And then I'm like, yes, but do you know what that funds? And they're like, what do you mean what it funds? And then I can bring them in. And I can start telling them about the mission of Opportunity Village. So they see how sometimes people may say, that's a little pricey to get in. Did you know your entrance fee is actually a donation that supports all these programs and services for over 10,000 individuals in our valley? Find that connection with them. They already know they love the magical forest, but do they know how important it is to bring people who are in isolation to be part of the community? A big thing in Las Vegas is being Vegas born, because not a lot of people are Vegas born, right? It's a very transient community. People will say, people come and go. So I'll ask people, how many are Vegas born when I have volunteers come out? And we'll see, sometimes we'll see a lot of hands go up. Sometimes I'll see a few hands go up. And I look at them and I say, did you know Opportunity Village was Vegas born? Started with 7 families back in 1954 who had children with disabilities. Back then, there wasn't special education. Back then, there was not places like Opportunity Village with workforce development. And they got together and became Vegas Strong, little tagline there, you guys have probably heard that before, and said, we're going to do something different, because they were told there's nothing for your kids. You institutionalize them or you keep them at home, right? That's the Cliff Notes version. There's nothing else for them. And they said, no, that's not good enough. And those 7 families started what we know today as Opportunity Village. Those 7 families turned into people selling hot cocoa and hanging some lights in a backyard for a fundraiser. That fundraiser is now the biggest one we have, which is the Magical Forest, which is over 2 million lights, carnival rides, and like I mentioned, up to 200 volunteers a night. So when people come to Opportunity Village, finding the ways to connect with them, finding the way to know their story so I can pull them into our story and build those bridges. So it's more than just, hey, I checked off my box so I can get maybe a discount on my insurance because I'm serving in the community. Or I put in my hours so I can be recommended for a raise because I'm serving in my community. Or I put in my hours for my scholarships because I'm serving in my community. They walked away saying, wow, that was really cool. Letting them know that they're part of Las Vegas history. Do you guys know when Elvis Presley was alive? I say, how many of you are Elvis fans? And believe it or not, there's people who will not raise their hands and will say, who's Elvis? And I'll be like, oh my gosh, I'm getting old for one. And 2, you need to Google Elvis. You live in Las Vegas. So when Elvis Presley was alive, though, he came to Las Vegas and he was so touched and moved by the mission and what was happening in people's lives that from that day forward, he told his manager the scarves he wore, for those of you who may not know Elvis, because now I know it's a thing, he would dress very ornate and throw his scarves out into the cheering audience. He told his manager from that day forward, his scarves were only to come from our Fine and Performing Arts FPA program. And from that day forward, they did. We still sell their scarves to this day. So because we live in Vegas, I say, so if you know any Elvis performers or Elvis fanatics, ask him where he got his scarves. And if they do not know, you tell them to come to Opportunity Village, because there's a piece of Vegas history that they're missing. And coming to Opportunity Village, they are part of the legacy of Las Vegas. They are part of a long-term, long-standing community effort to employ and connect with individuals who have developmental disabilities and the families who love them. Without the community, we would not exist. We have over 64 locations in our community that employ our individuals. That in 2019, I very rarely use numbers, but I know there's always numbers people in my audience. So I will come up and say, did you know in 2019, the individuals we served received over $3.5 million in salaries because of this community? How do people not know about Opportunity Village? They do. I have people that come from all over the world. Cameroon, Africa, the Physicians of Cameroon is the farthest group that came to serve at Opportunity Village to figure out what we were doing. All these little snippets to pull people in to say, what is important to you? What is valuable to you? I have a way to share a story of the people we serve or the things we're doing or the way the community comes together and say, hey, this group of individuals in this subculture of disabilities is important and they're valued. And we just don't want them living in our community. We want them to be a vital part of the community. We want them to be part of our Vegas Strong, right? We want them engaged. We see their value. So let me go back to that story about the ugly dog. I use that story a lot because I'm a dog person, in case you have figured it out. And I loved my Zoe. Her name was Zoe. What that little boy didn't know. Her name, he knew she was a dog. He got that part right. Thought she was ugly by his experience. Maybe he was used to fluffy dogs. He didn't know her breed. Zoe was rescued from the show ring. She was a whippet. She was my first dog as an adult that I had. super skinny. A Whippet is in the Greyhound family. So you have the Greyhound, you have the Whippet, and then you have the Italian Greyhound. The Whippet is one of the fastest dogs there is with the Greyhound. They are considered the world's fastest couch potatoes. I have a Whippet right now sitting out in front of me. Her name is Surprise, though. She's sleeping. They sleep like 80% of the day, and that is not a joke. He didn't know her nature. He didn't know that she has excessive greeting disorder, meaning every person she sees, she loves and must say hi to them. Doesn't matter how long her walk is supposed to last. She's going to walk up to every neighbor and make sure she gets her pats. He didn't know that that dog, that Whippet that he called the ugly dog, was actually the best in show. When she was rescued from the show ring, she got many awards for being perfect in her pedigree. So why do I share that with you? To get your attention. But also, people don't know what they don't know. People are going to view your organization and your mission through their experiences, through what they know, and many times what they don't know, be it a different subculture. Didn't know the breed of a Whippet, right? As a little boy. Maybe it's uncomfortable to them. Maybe they've never experienced it before. Maybe they've never interacted. I have lots of people who will say to me when they come out to volunteer, how do we interact with the individuals you serve? And I'll say, well, you talk to them. Just talk to them like you're talking to me. But they're sensitive and they're guarded because maybe they've never interacted with someone who has Down syndrome or who is in a wheelchair or who is on a feeding tube. And they don't want to offend, but they also are seeking that comfort to not, to be fully successful, right? In whatever they're trying to give. A conversation we have all the time, but it's very common for people who do not know and do not understand and do not have the education or the experience you have in your circle to turn it into a negative. It's ugly. It's not as valuable as this thing over here. Sports isn't as valuable because I don't enjoy it. I enjoy arts and music, so it's not important. It's our job to tell them why it is and how even that we may not enjoy sports, or maybe you do. Just an example. But that there's value in it, and all of it comes together to make this beautiful picture. That is our community, our society, our world. And when we break down those walls of misunderstanding and judgment and call all these little different things ugly, and we can show people and move them from the ugly dog to that little boy saying, oh, that's a Whippet, to that little boy knowing her name and saying, oh, that's Zoe. She lives across the street from me. She's my neighbor's dog. How do we do that? We share our mission. We share our stories. Why does the mission mean something to you? What is it about the mission? It's more than just a piece of paper. It's more than just a hanging on the wall. What keeps you up at night? What are your guys struggling? Why are you in front of this group to get them to volunteer, to get them to fund? What is it that they need to know? But what brings you laughter and joy? What is it you want them to see that the mission doesn't speak to? Those fun stories, those things that just make you smile. And how can you be vulnerable? How can you open up and share your own journey and share why you're working in a not-for-profit when you could go off and make buku bucks somewhere else? You know, why you stay where you're at? Why is this important to you? What brings tears to your eyes? Tell you what brings tears to my eyes is James is in Illinois. I adore James. If I didn't meet him, I never knew that I could have someone that I love so much, like a family member, who I talk to on a daily basis, even sometimes just for a few minutes. And it was because I opened myself up to stepping out into a sports world. I've never played a sport in my life. When we can open up that vulnerability and let people in, we can build those bridges, and your volunteers will come, your funding will come, but it starts with us. Figuring out how people view your mission, your organization, asking them the questions to begin with, getting the feedback, and then deciding which stories that you can't wait to share, that you typically only share with your inner circle, building those bridges. I promise the doors will open and you will have a lot more people, but you got to start with the stories. The numbers are always there. You can always give them the numbers. You can give them the financial statements. They can find all that. But it's lives that are touched and are changed is when you will see the big difference in support. That's what I have found successful. Those are the things that I always think about, my motivation, what keeps me up, what brings me laughter, what keeps me going, what do I not want to share that I really should? And then finding those bridges to meet people where they're at so they can view what we do through their experience, and that hopefully they'll come into our experience and maybe they'll walk away and say it's not for me, but they'll say it was worth it. So what I say about Special Olympics, I'm not knocking Special Olympics. Special Olympics is very valuable. They do amazing things. It's not my call. I'm not called to it, because if we each do what is on our heart that we're called to, gosh, wouldn't we all be so much more successful, right? And that's the challenge, is every person you bring in your door is to get them to walk away and be a partner in some way, to be a volunteer, or to say, man, that's worth it. You should check it out. That'll happen through the stories, but you have to be open up to share those stories. Ugly dog is actually pretty cute, and I wish I had a picture to share. Anyway, what questions do you guys have for me? I hope that gave you a little bit of insight and things to think about when you're going into presentations.
Well, I feel like this is going to be super short because we don't have participation today. What's going on with everybody? Wake up.
That's okay.
Usually we have about a 30-minute question and answer session at the end. Sometimes it's not always about the topic that we have on hand, but feel free to ask Heather any kinds of questions you would like.
Deal with burnout working for a nonprofit. For myself, and anyone can answer this. So I worked for nonprofits for some time. It's really relationships. It's reminding what I'm there for. And it's actually the stories. I remind myself. I have pictures in my office of me and James and his girlfriend dressed in onesies, because we used to do a onesie walk and take our dogs on walks together around the neighborhood. It was called our Christmas onesie walk. I have a Groot that talks. You know, you guys see Guardians of the Galaxy in my office. It's a discussion point. It's a storytelling. When someone says, oh, you like Groot? And I tell them, well, that's some of my Special Olympic athletes got together and asked people for money, totally humiliated me, to get that for me for my birthday. But now it's in my office and it reminds me of why I'm there. I remember the first moment when I walked down to spring games and a guy that primarily was nonverbal shouted out, Heather's here. And I stopped and my heart sunk. I thought, oh my gosh, he knows my name. And I take a vacation, even if it's just sitting at home and turning everything out, going to the movies and escaping. Just as much as I tell other people the stories to bring them in to our mission, I remind myself of the stories to keep going. Shannon or Brianna or anyone who's a talker want to add anything?
I think you already said it, just with relationships. I think that I try to do activities that bring me joy, like you mentioned earlier, like which ones give you joy. And so even if I'm feeling a little bit tired and like I've been working a lot, whenever we have our college trips or whenever we have some sort of activity involved with the students, I always make sure to tag along for those, because even if it feels like it's adding to my already busy schedule, I feel like more rejuvenized after I do it.
Yeah.
And I remember kind of why that I'm working at LIT again.
You see their experience and the outcome they're having, your work is having. If you didn't tag along, you'd miss out on that, right? And you just see the busy part, the hard work part.
I completely agree with you. So I work for communities and schools in Elko, and a lot of the times, like I do a lot of like the fundraising, community outreach, and volunteers, so I don't get to connect with the kids as much. And when I start to feel that lag, I really do just try to get in the classroom, maybe go to one of our big events and just kind of get grounded again with the actual mission. And sometimes that helps a little bit. For sure.
Anyone else?
I think for me, sometimes it's been a matter of shifting focus. So, I've mostly done nonprofit fundraising and working with volunteers like my whole life, but you still have a portfolio goal. You still have money that you have to bring in, or a specific amount or specific number of volunteers. So you have to continue to work on that so you can hit your goals by the end of the year. But sometimes shifting focus to do it in a different or creative, innovative, however you want to put it, way, so that you're not feeling that you're doing the same old thing constantly and you're like always climbing like uphill. And so I'm I want to say bad about that, but I'll go off on like these creative tangents where I find a different way to like still meet my goals, but feel more joy while doing it, I guess, instead of doing the same thing.
Yeah. All right. Well, there is lots of resources out there on storytelling, and it's not a one size fits all. It's figuring out what works for you. But if you feel that your presentations or your connections, and it doesn't always have to be a group, it can be a one-on-one. When I give tours of OV, it's a back and forth conversation more. And I tell the stories to try and connect that individual just as much as I do when I talk to a group. But what works for you? But I promise if you share the stories that excite you, that challenge you, all the different things I mentioned, your enthusiasm will come out, your concern will come out, your joys will come out because they resonate with you. And that will get people's attention. That will get people to come on board and listen, not just hear what you're saying, but really listen. And they may just say yes when you're making an ask. So storytelling is how I find success. I'm not the end all be all. There's lots of people who do different things, but I hope that you have something to think about what your stories are, and will challenge yourself to be vulnerable and sharing those so you can fulfill the mission and continue on the work that you're doing.
What do you think are like ideal formats for storytelling? Like what kind of media do you usually use, or like if you are doing it in like a large group, or even if you're not like directly in front of the group and you're doing more so I don't know, like, are social media posts very effective, or like what do you think is more effective for like large scale?
I do a lot on LinkedIn, and when I'm on LinkedIn, I always post. You guys want to find me on LinkedIn? On there, you'll see a lot of my connections. The minute I talk to somebody for whatever length, even if I get a no from them, I find them on LinkedIn and I connect. And I find their organization on LinkedIn and I followed it. And when they do come out and serve in any way, I make a post and I try to incorporate their mission. For example, we did a big project with Home Depot. And I remember the tagline, "Their doers get things done." And I tagged in the thing, I put something like just a bunch of doers getting things done thanks to Home Depot, and always try to bring in who they are to show the unity with who we are and how they support inclusion through just being who they are. So I do that a lot with LinkedIn. That has made a lot of connections with me here in the Vegas community. It's very active here in Las Vegas. So it's opened up a lot of doors, and I've got a lot of new people reach out to me through LinkedIn as they've seen more and more posts and seen that they want to be part of the mission of what we're doing. It's a way to educate people on what our needs are, all different needs. As far as framework in a presentation, I think it's really what you're most comfortable with, because what's going to bring out you and who you are is going to be the best thing. If we were in a group and we were in a room, I would probably have a picture of Zoe, my dog, at the end to show you how beautiful she was. She's no longer with us. I would probably have a picture of James. I wouldn't do a lot of bullet points because then people are spending way too much time reading and they're not listening. I would actually go up to people and ask them and say, "Hey, what do you think? Tell me more about that," and really engage them in that conversation. It's a little harder to do over Zoom calls and team calls, but we're spread out, and I'm just glad we're able to connect like this. So I think it's really figuring out what works for you. And as you get more comfortable with speaking, knowing how you adapt that to connect with different groups. I hope that answered your question. All right.
Any other questions for Heather? Well, if we don't have any other questions, I definitely want to thank you, Heather, for your very valuable time today and for a great and fun presentation. Thank you for telling us all about your dog and how that fits. I did want to mention for everybody on the call that the call is recorded and it will be added to our Nevada Volunteer Managers Networking platform on Basecamp. So you'll all get an email so that you can join that if you haven't done so already. And then our next Lunch and Learn will be on July 21st. It's always the third Thursday of each month from 11 to 12:30. And we do have the guest speaker, but they have not chosen their topic yet. So I'll make sure I send out an e-blast to everybody so you can get registered for it. Please feel free to share with other volunteer managers across the state if they don't, subscribe to Nevada Volunteers. They don't know that the Lunch and Learns are happening. And our goal really is to strengthen volunteerism throughout the state by strengthening you as volunteer managers and offering these training opportunities. And so, and networking opportunities even, because as I said, some of you will come on and ask questions about other things pertaining to your jobs, which is great. But the platform really allows you to ask those questions and get answers specifically just to your questions. So the bigger our network is, the better and stronger we will all be together. So please feel free to share. And if you don't have any other questions, I just want to make sure, Heather, that you're seeing the thank yous in the
yes.
chat. It's always nice to know that people learn things. Like that's I think that's what brings me joy. Doing these is not in my it's not the thing that makes me the most comfortable, that's for sure. So to have people say we value this and we learned something, that brings me joy. So hopefully it does you too. So I hope that everyone has an amazing day and we will see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.